This is the history of Jewish athletes at the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan is known for excellence in academics, research, and athletics. As a public institution that draws from the best students from around the world, Michigan has served as the leaders and best in nearly every thinkable field since its founding in 1817. It is, in my opinion, the greatest university in the world. Michigan Athletics claims 55 national championships across all sports and is arguably the most storied and influential athletics program in all of college sports. From Fielding Yost to Tom Brady, Michigan Athletics, especially football, has served as the ultimate reflection of U of M and the university's core values. Differing from the elitist culture of the Ivy League while still retaining similar pedigree, Michigan has gained the reputation of offering an uncommon education for the common man. Building off of Thomas Jefferson's Northwest Ordinance found on top of Angel Hall today, the University of Michigan has always followed the sentiment providing the means of public education, making the first real promise of free universal public education to immigrants, middle class people, women, and people from varying religious backgrounds. So, how did Michigan's uncommon approach to inclusion in public education connect with their storied athletics history? This brings us to the story of Jewish athletes at the University of Michigan, names you've likely heard of and some that are deserving of more recognition. This illustrious story of Michigan athletics cannot be told without Jewish athletes, and I'm excited to share more. In the early 20th century, anti-Semitism was rampant across the world. With economic and political upheaval in Europe following World War I and soon after the economic crisis of the Great Depression, Jews were often the target of pent-up rage and centuries-long hatred. Nationalism gave rise to fascist movements that made Jews the target of their regimes. In Germany, Hitler's Nazi regime came to power in 1933, systematically stripping Jews of nearly all their rights and dignity. The Nazis used the 1936 Olympics, which we'll discuss later in the documentary, to push their propaganda. The United States and even the state of Michigan were not excluded from this awful discrimination and violence. Many U.S. newspapers ran cartoons depicting Jews as greedy or corrupt and blamed them for the stock market crash of 1929. Michigan itself was home to some of the most prominent anti-Semitic voices in America. One of those influential men was Henry Ford, who used his newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, to spread false and hateful myths about Jews, including reprinting the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. His paper ran anti-Semitic articles and conspiracy theories blaming Jews for everything from labor unrest to World War I. These writings were packaged into four books that were circulated widely in the U.S. and throughout the state of Michigan. His writings were even cited admirably by Adolf Hitler, and Ford received the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest Nazi honor for a foreigner. Meanwhile, in Royal Oak, not too far from Ann Arbor, Father Charles Coughlin, the so-called radio priest, reached millions of listeners with weekly broadcasts railing against Jewish bankers and global conspiracies. His words helped promote mainstream anti-Semitism for an entire generation of Americans and played perfectly into the global conspiracy that the Nazis used to justify their persecution of Jews. Meanwhile, Jewish life at the University of Michigan was thriving while still being constrained by the deeply ingrained anti-Semitism on college campuses. Michigan Hillel, founded in 1926, was one of the first in the nation, became a spiritual and cultural home for Jewish students at Michigan. Still, anti-Semitic attitudes persisted, and Jewish students were often covertly or even outwardly barred from social fraternities, clubs, local housing, university leadership, and more. U of M was by no means shielded from the anti-Semitism of the 1920s. To many Jewish Americans, higher education was the pathway to opportunity. Yet the gates of the Ivy League were often not open to them. By the 1920s, elite schools like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, and many medical schools introduced quote unquote character tests and interviews as a way to cut down Jewish enrollment without directly saying it. Their goal was to limit Jewish enrollment to below 10% of the student population. At some schools, the number of Jewish students dropped by even more than half once quotas were put in place. Even after some quotas loosened in the 1940s and 50s, subtle discrimination in admissions and organizations still lingered. As a result, ambitious Jewish students, especially from the East Coast, began to look westward to places like Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the University of Michigan had developed a reputation for merit over pedigree. Jewish enrollment climbed significantly at U of M in the 1950s and 60s. As we discussed in class, the uniquely American phenomenon of athletics being combined with a university educational experience brought the Jewish experience on campus and Michigan's unmatched athletics culture together. The stories of Jewish athletes at Michigan have not frequently been examined, and their impact on Michigan athletics and our university should be celebrated and shared. And there's no better person to start with than Benny Friedman. Benny Friedman was one of Michigan's greatest student athletes and certainly the most notable of Jewish descent at U of M. Freeman was a legendary quarterback on the 1925 and 26 Michigan teams. A son of Jewish immigrants from Cleveland, Ohio, Freeman transformed the game with his mastery of the forward pass, something that was very uncommon in football at the time, forming the quote-unquote Benny to Benny connection with fellow star wide receiver Benny Oosterbaan. The two led Michigan to dominant 7-1 records in 1925 and 26, and Freeman became one of the first true stars of college football. In the era of players playing on both sides of the ball, Freeman also contributed on the defensive end. Freeman immediately changed Michigan from an ordinary football team into a great one. Much like Hank Greenberg in the 1930s, Freeman's success in the 1920s was often a source of pride for Jews across the United States. In 1926, at a ceremony before Michigan's game in Baltimore against the Naval Academy, the Jewish Times presented Freeman with a statue of himself. Following the 1926 season, Freeman left Michigan to play for the upstart Cleveland Bulldogs. Um, the franchise would later move to Detroit and named the Wolverines. Freeman was a financial and on-field boost for the franchise, as professional football was at the time much less popular than college football. Freeman was so popular that the Mara family of the New York Giants purchased the Detroit Wolverines solely to acquire Freeman. Despite an amazing professional career, Freeman would not be inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame in 2005, which was decades after his death. Many attribute this to anti-Semitic attitudes towards Jewish football players and not enough recognition of Freeman's extraordinary contributions to the game at both the collegiate and professional level. Freeman was inducted into the Michigan Jewish Sports Hall of Fame in 1985, along with other great Jewish athletes in the state of Michigan, such as Hank Greenberg and fellow Michigan quarterback Harry Newman, who we'll discuss later. After retiring as a player, Freeman continued to contribute to college football, but in a very different setting than the Big House or Ann Arbor. Freeman assumed the role of athletic director and the first ever, and one of the only ever, football coaches at the newly formed Brandeis University, a Jewish university in Waltham, Massachusetts. At a time when anti-Semitic stereotypes questioned Jewish toughness and athleticism, Freeman proved the opposite with his unmatched success and impact on the sport of football. As Michigan athletics historian and writer Craig Ross, who generously gave his time to speak with me, describes how Freeman overcame the historical limitations of a college quarterback and even the prejudice of his own coach at Michigan, head coach George Little. Connection would be that he later became the athletic director at Brandeis, which, is being a Jewish school.
Yeah. And he started the football program at Brandeis. So Freeman to me, is one of the most interesting persons in the history of sports. Not just, Jewish people, all people. And I would argue, in fact, I have argued it, is that he's the greatest football player of all time. And that the only person you can put in that category with him is Jim Brown. The reason why he wasn't playing was a guy named George Little, who was the coach that year. And George Little was a true anti-Semite, and wanted nothing to do with Friedman. He and Friedman got into it all the time. Friedman was no shrinking violet, that's for sure, and wouldn't put up with much shit. And so he and Little were always in it. And that was a year, of course, I think it was 24 when they got killed, maybe 25, by Illinois and Red Grange. So Little, in a fit of snits, puts Friedman in at the end of that game. And where does he play him? Defensive end. Violent, but of course no one could throw the ball anyway because the ball was this big watermelon thing. It was like between a soccer ball and today's football, and so throwing it was, there was one or two games where Rockne was able to make use of the forward pass, but really it wasn't a part of the game until the mid-20s when Friedman showed up. Friedman could pass it somehow. He was not a big man. He was a small man, but he could throw the ball. And he, to Benny Oosterbaan, formed this passing combination, Benny to Benny. Well,
Following Freeman's departure for the professionals, another great Jewish quarterback arrived at Michigan. Harry Newman showed up at Michigan in 1929 as an undersized Jewish kid from Detroit and right away did not fit the stereotype of a typical Big Ten quarterback. At the time, people were surprised how Newman could command Michigan's offense while also dealing with slurs he heard from opposing fans on the road. Newman played on the 1932 and 1933 national championship teams for Michigan, and was part of some of the greatest teams during the era of Harry Kipke. Meanwhile, Harry Bennett was one of Henry Ford's closest and most feared assistants. As we discussed earlier, Henry Ford's anti-Semitism was prominent throughout Michigan, and Bennett was one of his closest allies. Ford himself was openly anti-Semitic, and Bennett helped him achieve his goals by targeting any of Ford's opponents in his house on Getty's Road in Ann Arbor, where he would, quote unquote, impose Ford's will and deal with anyone that Ford considered an enemy. The irony of this is that Harry Bennett, Ford's assistant, was very close with Harry Kipke, the football coach of Michigan at the time, who was coaching Jewish quarterback Harry Newman. This ironic twist shows that while Newman, the Jewish star who led Michigan to national championships in 32 and 33, was playing for a man who was friends with anti-Semites. This shows the connection between the Jewish experience at Michigan and the anti-Semitism surrounding their time on the football field. Meanwhile, another Michigan athlete at Michigan, a Jewish athlete at Michigan, who pushed barriers was Joe Magidson, a standout halfback for the University of Michigan in the early 1910s, and the first Jewish athlete to earn a varsity letter in football at the school. Playing under legendary football coach Fielding Yost, Magidson was known for his speed, toughness, and ability to shine in big moments, helping Michigan win big games against rivals like Minnesota and Penn. Madison's connection to Judaism was visible throughout his career, most famously when he chose not to play on the Jewish holiday Rosh Hashanah in 1910. At a time when religious accommodation in sports was almost non-existent, his decision was courageous. His coach Fielding Yost respected his choice, and newspapers around the country took notice, framing Madison as a symbol of both athletic excellence and pride for his Jewish background. His refusal to compromise on his faith helped pave the way for later Jewish athletes at Michigan and other athletes who faced tensions between their sports commitments and religious observances, including Dodgers pitcher Sandy Koufax, who would miss a World Series game in observance of a Jewish holiday. Another great Jewish athlete at the University of Michigan was Sam Stoller. Sam Stoller was a sprinter from Cincinnati who excelled on Michigan's track and field team in the 1930s. Stoller ran against future Big Ten competitor and close friend Jesse Owens while in high school in Ohio. Owens would go on to attend Ohio State and set a world record at Michigan's Ferry Field. It's probably the only time that team from Columbus has ever beaten Michigan in anything. Stoller arrived in the mid-30s and quickly emerged as one of the fastest athletes on the team. He was known for his explosive starts, smooth running form, and quiet competitive traits that made him stand out even on a powerhouse track team like Michigan. At Michigan, he became a Big Ten championship and helped elevate the Wolverines' national reputation. His performances were what earned him a spot on the 1936 Olympic team, making him one of the few Jewish athletes from a major university to reach that level at that time. However, the Olympics that year would be held in Berlin, Germany, where the Nazis were hoping to use this opportunity to promote their propaganda to promote the Aryan race. But just before the relay event that year, Stoller and his Jewish teammate Marty Glickman were suddenly replaced. As Craig Ross explains, this was a terrible moment for Jewish athletes and for Stoller, but would not deter him from returning to Michigan in 1937 and going on to win multiple Big Ten championships.
Yeah, Sam Stoller was a sprinter. I'm not sure, where was he from?
He was from Ohio too, because he ran against Jesse Owens in high school.
Right, that's very good. Yes, he did run against, and Owens usually beat him in 100 at least. Now I'm not sure in the 60, because Stoller at one point held the world's record for the 60-yard dash, and in the 100. Stoller claimed that all he ever saw was Owens' backside, but there may have been one or two instances where Stoller actually beat Owens in the 100, but they raced many, many times. Yeah. Stoller came to Ann Arbor, was a great track guy, and was going to be involved and made the Olympic team in the 36 year, the year where it was held in Berlin, and and the year that Owens, of course, won, I think, 4 medals in that Olympics. Go to the coach and to Avery Brundage, who was a major racist and anti-Semite. who was the head of the Olympic Committee, and Brundage, said, no, no, we can't insult Hitler. You can have Owens, but no Glickman. Might have not run in the race anyway, and no Stoller, who definitely would have run in the race. And so they won anyway by several seconds. There was this garbage story that was probably floated by Brundage that they were worried about the German team because they had some super secret star who they had never run before, who was going to come out and run in the Olympics.
Another great athlete, Jewish athlete at the University of Michigan, following greats before him like Benny Friedman and Sam Stoller, was Dan Jaworski. Jaworski was a four-year starter on Fritz Kreisler's Wolverines teams from 1945 to 48, playing linebacker, fullback, and center, and helping to lead the storied Mad Magicians teams to back-to-back national championships. Jaworski continued to contribute in a significant way to Michigan athletics later after graduating, becoming an architect and helping to design the Chrysler Center, the home today of Michigan basketball. He also had the idea to put the Block M on the east side of the bleachers inside Michigan Stadium. Next up, we'll discuss some more modern day Jewish athletes at the University of Michigan. Most recently, Danny Wolf of the Michigan basketball team and now of the Brooklyn Nets, and Dylan Larkin, who played for Michigan hockey. These two have built on the legacy of past athletes like Freeman, Newman, and Stoller, and have been openly proud of their Jewish faith and culture while here at Michigan and been active in Jewish life. It's also notable to recognize Jewish donors to the University of Michigan, such as Stephen M. Ross, who's significantly contributed to the U of M's business school, as well as our athletic campus, as well as Jeff Blah, who's also contributed to both the business school and athletic campus. Jewish donors at Michigan and Jewish alumni have played a significant role in the growing of our on-campus presence, our athletic department, and our prestige around the world. And it's vital to discuss their connection to our storied athletics history and the history of Jewish athletes here at Michigan. Michigan has always been a place where opportunity and purpose and an uncommon education for the common man has shaped not only students but athletes. Benny Friedman revolutionized the passing game. Harry Newman led the Wolverines to a national championship, even while his head coach was friends with anti-Semites. Sam Stoller faced the weight of prejudice on the Olympic stage, and Joe Madison stood firm in his faith by sitting out on Rosh Hashanah. Today, players like Danny Wolf carry that legacy forward. Each generation built on the courage and determination of the ones before, breaking barriers and rewriting what it means to be a Jewish athlete and a Jewish student at Michigan. This student is deeply important to me as I'm very proud of my university and heritage and hope that further research and celebration could occur between the Michigan Athletic Department and Jewish organizations on campus like Hillel or the Frankel Center for Jewish Studies, which was a great resource for this presentation. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about my presentation. I want to give a special thanks to the Bentley Historical Library, which was a fantastic resource and is something that I encourage everyone to visit on campus, as well as Professor Dooley and the History of College Athletics team that helped me work towards this presentation and inspired me throughout the semester. Thank you for taking time to learn more about the history of Jewish athletes at Michigan, and as always, go blue.